Hi, this is the introduction to Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales. We will be going through some background information of not only Chaucer, but about the time period itself, as well as specifically the Canterbury Tales. Take notes on the outline that I provided for you. The notes can be in any format, bullet format, or sentences, whatever you feel the most comfortable with. So, Geoffrey Chaucer lived from 1343 to 1400. If anyone has seen the movie The Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger, Geoffrey Chaucer is actually portrayed in that movie. He's the naked guy they pick up on the side of the road who gambles a lot but writes beautifully. Are you feeling popular? Or are you excluded from conversation? Do you have an appetite for your gravy? Or do you need a recipe? Believe it or not, 6 of these words and the last 2 sentences were created by Geoffrey Chaucer. He's the first person we know of who wrote them down. Okay, perhaps he didn't create them or invent them, but he did write them down. He is one of England's greatest poets, maybe even England's first great poet. But as well as a poet, he was also a soldier, a traveler, a diplomat, a civil servant, and perhaps even a spy. He had a little bit of a seedy background. There's information that he maybe danced with the devil a little bit. He was not straight-laced and kind of devoted to his writing. The character that, or the person that portrays Chaucer in the movie The Knight's Tale is a pretty good representation of who he is. He was born around 1343 and died around 1400. In an age when most people stayed in their hometown, he traveled all across Europe, mostly on the king's business. He was the son of an influential English wine merchant, so he had a lot of money, which helped secure him as a page in a royal house. This allowed to broaden his knowledge of the various social classes because he was exposed to so many different types of people. He served in the military in France. He was captured during that service. King Edward III paid for his ransom, and he came back to England to serve in a variety of government positions. When he was in his 20s, he actually began writing poetry, and he wrote poetry in English, and we'll talk about later why this was so important. Writing in English may not sound like a new idea, especially to you, because you are an English-speaking and writing person, but for the nobility and gentry of Richard II's court, when Chaucer began, English was seen as a language only fit for the poor people. Rich and educated people spoke French to one another and were used to reading and writing in Latin. So if you spoke English, you were looked down upon, as it was seen as the language of the low class. There wasn't even really an official sort of English. People throughout the country spoke different dialects, so English in one area would sound extremely different as opposed to another. It was English spoken in the southeast of England that became the language we actually speak today. And Chaucer was the one who was helping shape it. Huge amounts of the words we use today were first used in writing by Chaucer himself, whether he overheard them when he was in the southeast part of England or not, or he borrowed them from other languages or just completely invented them. He was the first person to actually use the following words. Words like miracle and porch and horrible and sudden and scripture and comment and contradiction. Very interesting, very character. He wrote other works in French and Italian. Let's not say that he didn't write anything in French and Italian. He did, but the Canterbury Tales is his most recognized piece. He wrote an incredible amount, including everything from comic and a little bit of rude and kind of lewd stories to stories about love and poetry to a science textbook that he wrote for his son. However, as I said before, the best known is the Canterbury Tales, which is a collection of stories written in verse. He is buried in Westminster Abbey. Many English poets who admire his work have asked to be buried next to him. This is that area of the Abbey which came to be known as the Poet's Corner. So now let's talk specifically about the Canterbury Tales, and here's an overview of what the Canterbury Tales are. It was not published until 1400, after Chaucer's death, as it's not completed. He was never able to complete it. It tells a story of characters that meet while on a pilgrimage to Canterbury. The finished work was supposed to have 30 characters, including Chaucer himself, each telling 4 tales. So it should have been a collection of 120 stories. However, only 1/5 of it was complete when he died. Now, you can do the math and figure that out. It incorporates all classes of people. People who were seen to be very different, but are ultimately all searching for the same thing in Canterbury. And we'll talk about why people go on pilgrimages a little bit later. It's noted for being one of the first books of poetry that's written in English. Most works were written in French or Latin, and as we said, English was considered crude. The title, The Canterbury Tales, is not actually Chaucer's title. It was added after it was published. The tales range in genre from romance to satire to fable to sermon. And the tone ranges from pious, very religious and devout, to vulgar. So why did people go to Canterbury? Why on earth would people go on a pilgrimage? What we need to know about first is the story of Thomas Becket. Okay? Thomas Becket was born in England in 1118. He studied abroad, but then he came back to England and was assigned to the Canterbury Cathedral under the Archbishop. When the Archbishop died in 1161, King Henry II appointed Becket to be the Archbishop of Canterbury, or the head of the Christian church in England. Huge responsibility, huge role. And Thomas Becket, who's devoted his entire life to the church and to England, obviously readily took this position. He appointed Becket, though, because Henry believed that he could then control the church. He said, I can control Becket, so if I appoint him, I'll then be able to control the church. Well, Becket and Henry grew apart. And as Becket realized that he could not always serve his king and also follow the teachings of Christ, he was more willing to follow what he believed was right and good as opposed to following King Henry II. So, King Henry II was heard or overheard by 4 of his knights uttering something along the lines of, will no one get rid of this guy for me? He's so troublesome. I really wish that someone would get rid of Thomas Becket. Well, the 4 knights, responding to what they thought was an actual order, or so the story goes, the knights attacked Becket. So you have 4 knights that go to the cathedral, attack Becket in the cathedral, and murder him as he prayed. Horrible. Absolutely horrible. I don't care what you believe in or what religion you are. That is an unbelievable act. Immediately following Becket's death, it was heard that certain people were cured of illness by traveling to Canterbury Cathedral. Becket was seen as a martyr. Okay? He died for his cause, and he died for his church, and he died doing what he thought or what he believed was right. So people started to go to Canterbury Cathedral to mourn him, and people believed that they were being cured of illnesses. King Henry was upset by the news of the death, and eventually himself took a journey to Canterbury, where he did a penance by walking the last mile barefoot and being whipped by monks. Penance is punishment. Okay, so he believed that because his words were misconstrued, he must do a penance in order to get back into God's good graces. So his idea of a punishment or penance was to walk to Canterbury, and the last mile was walking barefoot as he was being whipped by monks. 2 centuries later, Chaucer did not even need to give the name of Becket in the general prologue, and we'll talk about this. He calls him the holy blissful martyr, and everyone knows who he's referencing, as he's referencing Thomas Becket. London to Canterbury. So this is the kind of route that people would go when they went on a pilgrimage to Canterbury. Not a far walk, right? It's approximately 60-65 miles. It's a long ways. If we look at it on these maps, you can notice the space between London and Canterbury. So, you have to understand what a pilgrimage is. A pilgrimage is a religious journey undertaken for penance or punishment for sinning, or for grace, or to gain favor or the love of God. So people go on a pilgrimage for 2 reasons, either for punishment or to gain the favor and love of God. Canterbury is not a very difficult place for English people to reach. And that's why it was such a popular tourist attraction, because it really wasn't that far of a walk or journey from London. Pilgrims traveled to see the remains of St. Thomas Becket. Soon after his death, he became the most popular saint in England. And it wasn't an entirely solemn occasion, as it offered the pilgrims an opportunity to abandon work and to kind of take a vacation. People didn't vacation to Cape Cod or vacation to the beach or go skiing like people do now. They would vacation to family members' homes or go on pilgrimages. So going on a pilgrimage was a way to relax. Although you're thinking to yourself, walking 65 miles is probably not your idea of relaxing. For them it was. And it was also a way to socialize and to meet people. Now let's get into the actual gist of, or the content of, the Canterbury Tales. You have the tales that are named by the person that's telling them. So the knight's tale is told by the knight. The miller's tale is told by the miller. The prioress's tale is told by the prioress, so on and so forth. But before all this, you have the prologue. And the prologue is the introduction to the Canterbury Tales. This is going to give us background or information about what is going to happen. Very important. Chaucer is the narrator. He is talking directly to us. He is talking directly to the reader. The prologue is divided into 6 parts. Part 1 is the intro or description, and it celebrates the time of year that they're going on the pilgrimage. And they're going on the pilgrimage in the springtime. There's a vivid description of the physical renewal of the earth, which parallels the spiritual renewal of the pilgrims, and explains where they are going. Part 2 of